Hello, everybody. Welcome to this month's Living with Parkinson's Meetup. I'm Chris Kruger, Program Manager for Educational Content with the Davis-Phinney Foundation. And like our panelists, I live with Parkinson's. I was diagnosed in 2020 when I was 37. I'm really glad to be here again, and along with all the panelists. And today we're going to talk about portrayals of Parkinson's in popular media. And we're also going to take a couple questions that have come in before the meetup, and hopefully we'll get to some that are asked during the meetup too. Yeah, so we'll get started in a minute, but before we do, I just want to ask the panelists to introduce themselves. And since we're talking about media related to Parkinson's, the question for today that I'd like you to talk about, panelists, is just if you have a favorite song that relates to Parkinson's in some way, please share that when you introduce yourselves. And why don't we start with Robin?
Hey, everybody. Robin Morades, phoning in from sunny Charlotte, North Carolina. You didn't know we had beaches in Charlotte, did you? Diagnosed in 2015 at 46 years old, but dealing with symptoms for 20 years prior to that, really. And I was thinking about, I don't have a favorite song, but there was a song that when it came out, I thought that should be my Parkinson's anthem. And it's called A Little Unsteady. And I think it's about a relationship, but you can't tell. And it's like, hold on, I'm a little unsteady. That's the whole chorus over and over again. So that's it for me.
All right, yeah, and while we're at this, if you have a song that you think of as your Parkinson's anthem, go ahead and throw it in the chat, please. And Kevin, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, please? Oh, I think you're muted.
Hey everyone, I'm Kevin Kwok. Usually I dial in from my home in Boulder, Colorado, but today I'm actually dialing from Walnut Creek, California, where I've seen my parents. Picking one song is tough. It's a tough call, Chris. So I'm gonna play around with one song, which is my energetic song. And that song is a sort of an electro funk song called I'm Losing It. I think it's by the Fishers, and it's really fun. It just sort of repeated every time I feel like I'm losing my mind or losing something that I set down. That's the song I play. I'm Losing It. I think that as far as a more introspective song that I think of a lot, it's the recent Billie Eilish show, What Was I Made For? I just feel like I'm constantly asking, how do I reinvent myself in this world of Parkinson's? So that's my second song. So sorry I gave you two, Chris.
No, that's okay. It was hard for me to do this too. I have a long list myself. So, and I think Sam mentioned in the chat. By the way, Sam, one of my colleagues, is in the chat, and she'll be answering some questions during the meetup today and helping us out. So thanks, Sam. So Christy, you're up.
Sorry, everyone. So I'm Christy LaMonica. I'm from Troy, or I live in Troy, New York. My favorite song that I think of when I think of Parkinson's, but it's not really Parkinson's related at all. It's about another song about relationships too. It's the Weeks, their song called Buttons. Nobody's probably heard of it. It's okay.
It's all good. We'll learn, and we'll put this in the chat, or we'll put this in the blog post, and we'll have a playlist for you of all these songs. So please add your songs to the chat. And there's Devin saying that she thinks it's a great song in the chat. So Shri, please tell us where you're at and give us a song if you've got one.
Hey, I'm Shri. I'm from the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area, not the LA Bay or Tampa Bay. San Francisco Bay Area is the only Bay Area, in case anybody was in doubt. I actually don't associate any songs with Parkinson's at all. I love music, but I just never did. But I will say one of my favorite songs of all time is Harry Belafonte's Jumpin' Like, Shake, 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 Sonora. that came in Beetlejuice. And so when I heard that song after I was diagnosed, I mean, I'd heard it before, that kind of reminded me of Parkinson's, but it's so associated with Beetlejuice for me that it doesn't, if that makes sense. I always think of Beetlejuice more than Parkinson's, but it still reminds me of Parkinson's. Yeah, that's it.
All right. Yeah, that's a great song and a great movie. Doug, what do you got for us?
Hi, everyone. Doug Reed calling in from Lafayette, Colorado. I was diagnosed at age 36 in 2010. My songs, plural, so Kevin isn't the only one given a couple of songs, but they're all from the album by the Head and the Heart. The album name is called Let's Be Still. Track 6 is called Shake. Track 7 is called Cruel. And track 8 is called Let's Be Still. So those are my tunes.
Yeah, great. I love the Head and the Heart. That's a band I really enjoy listening to myself. Brian, you're up.
I don't know. I was trying to think of songs that I might have up there, and I was thinking I really love things that get me moving. So I was thinking of something like with Bob Seger, but there's so many of his I can't really pick one right off the top of my head. But I don't know that I had to test any of them to Parkinson's because I don't think of music that way. But somebody asked it when we began this, and my audio wasn't working, but I am out of the hospital. The surgery was amazingly successful, took away 75% of my pain. And now I just have to gingerly get the strength back to move and stuff. So, and it was minimally invasive. They didn't put screws, pins, or anything in there. They just pulled out a whole bunch of gunk. So anyway.
All right. Thanks, Brian. I'm glad you're on the mend. That's great news. So I didn't share my story, my song. I have so many in this list, but I think I'm going to go with the one that I originally thought of, which is "Waiting for Superman" by the Flaming Lips. And that whole album, actually, that song is on, is a good one for this, sort of like Brian or like Doug's Head and the Heart album. It's called The Soft Bulletin, and I think all the songs could be heard in through a Parkinson's lens. So, all right, let's get into the meat of the topic. Which we're going to talk about Parkinson's in the media, like I've said. And by media, I think this could mean TV, movies, news media, any video news or audio news, print news, books, social media. And I guess, all media can affect people in a variety of ways. And, it can inform you, it can affect your emotions, and the information can be helpful or hurtful, and the effects can be helpful or hurtful. So, I thought it was a good idea to try to talk about these different categories. And I think maybe of media, and maybe we'll start with fictional stories or even documentaries that come across in a video form. So, in the past year or so, that would include the documentary Still, perhaps, that came out not long ago. And a number of other shows that have come up. So I'm wondering if any of the panelists have any show that stands out, or movie or documentary that stands out to them as something they might give the Academy Award to for best film about Parkinson's, considering that the Academy Awards were very recent. That's a timely thing to consider, I guess. Okay, yeah, Doug, what do you got for us?
I'd like to nominate a former Living with Parkinson's Meetup panelist, Heather Kennedy. Her short film, A Mountain at My Gates, if you go to YouTube and search for Heather Kennedy or search for A Mountain at My Gate, you'll find it. It's a short film. I think she won some awards for it, but it really described what young onset Parkinson's is like for me, and I get choked up each time I watch it. There's also a TED Talk on YouTube from Emma Watson, who is a young British lady. She was diagnosed at age 29, and she gives a presentation on what I've learned from Parkinson's. So if you Google Emma Watson or go on YouTube and search for Emma Watson, she's got a list of 10 things she's learned from Parkinson's that keep her happy, keep her moving forward. So those two films, I think, are very impressive.
Yeah, so you jumped right into an interesting nuance to this, which is the way in which the people can be involved in producing, anyone can be involved in producing their own materials and their own films. So that's an important thing to make sure we talk about it. How does that affect us? That it's empowering, it's informative, all that's it can be really positive. So thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, Kevin.
We're hitting on a topic that I love. This idea of broadcasting more to the public on people living with Parkinson's as sort of everyday characters. For me, that's just the more we see it in the media, the better. And picking a favorite tough, right? Because you have different categories. You got the documentaries, the self-produced documentaries, the movies. So I'll start with the what I love in the movies, and I really have loved two movies, Love and Other Drugs, and also a late quartet. I find that both of those are earlier portrayals of Parkinson's, and I think they've done their research well. The characters that play the role, Christopher Walken in the late quartet case, and Anne Hathaway in Love and Other Drugs. I think they do a relatively good job of not glorifying what Parkinson's is and really showing the subtleties and changes as you progress. In Anne Hathaway's role, I love the fact that she really does a great job of showing some of the impulse control issues. Here's a young individual so for those of us who entered this in as sort of a young onset, I think she plays the role well. I love the fact that her boyfriend, what's his name, Jake Gyllenhaal, used to play a role of what I used to do professionally as a pharmaceutical representative. So I like to think that I play a little bit of that. The Christopher Walken role in a late quartet, I thought was really very subtle and very deep. In that particular episode, he was a classic musician playing a cello in a quartet, and he was diagnosed with Parkinson's. What I thought was really interesting wasn't so much his life, but the fact that everybody else around him, the other members of the quartet, fell apart when all of that happened. And so to me, that was also a very poignant moment as well. I think I'll take a pause here because there are others that I love to chat about and pass it on to someone else.
Yeah, Christy, you've got your hand up for a while. Let's see. What do you have?
I'm sorry, I'm so dyskinetic. I can't stop moving. But how about, has anyone seen the episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm with Michael J. Fox?
Excellent.
That was hilarious because he totally overdid everything. And so it was just really funny. I would totally recommend watching it because you end up hating Larry even more in typical Curb Your Enthusiasm style.
Yeah,
I love that episode. I thought that episode is one of my favorite of anything. And I think that's the only thing I've seen. So
me too. I love when he shakes the can of soda and just stomps around in the booth. It's so funny. Because I mean, it all helps, but he just overdoes it. It's like, it's really hilarious. The only someone with Parkinson's would know that's overdone.
Yeah, I do know that. Yeah, I do know that talking to some friends and some acquaintances, they were not as comfortable with the show or the episodes as I was. So I know that it can be triggering for some people. But I loved it, and it's, there are triggers out there. So
that episode is just the best. I mean, the rest of the show is whatever, but that episode is just the funniest.
Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely want to go there to talk about, I think we want to go there to talk about the ways in which it's sort of can be difficult to see some of these presentations. But let's see what Doug, you've had your hand up, so let's hear what Doug has.
I was going to point out that I don't know if you put the page together or not, but on the Davis Phinney website, dpf.org, if you search for TV media, it'll bring up a hit for a page that has a listing of many of these movies and video clips that we're talking about. But there's one that's mentioned there that I watched just yesterday called The Zone. And it's about an older mountain climber who has Parkinson's, and he's trying to climb a mountain he's climbed before. But as a nature lover and beautiful scenery, it's got great scenery, and it was very uplifting. Where some of these media things about Parkinson's really hit me hard and make me feel emotional. But The Zone was uplifting.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good one. I enjoy that movie. Robin.
Yep. For any Ray Donovan fans out there, Ray Donovan on Showtime, he has a brother, a character named Terry, who has Parkinson's, who is a career boxer. And I like how it's portrayed because it's obvious to me that whoever wrote the show and wrote the script is intimately familiar with Parkinson's. It's not overdone and overblown, but it's also not stereotyped, if that makes sense. And there's a lot of nuance in how the character is represented. And you can see him it's not part of the main storyline at all, but it's part of the arc of his character that you can see how things progress over time for him. And so I felt it was extremely accurate. The only thing I found inaccurate is he gets DBS surgery and he uses the remote, and the higher he turns it up in the remote, the faster he boxes when he goes back to boxing. And he kind of burns his little head system out on that. I mean, it's pretty funny actually, but it's kind of a material misrep as to how DBS works. It's not like if I keep turning up my settings, I can run faster and faster and faster. And that's kind of how they portray it. So that was unfortunate. And then what happens in the show later on is that Alan Alda actually is a new character that comes on in many seasons later, and he plays a therapist who has Parkinson's. So I just think it's interesting because he crosses paths with Terry at some of their, big and loud speech therapy sessions. And so I do feel like it's a pretty accurate representation, kind of pulling back the curtain on just day-to-day life with Parkinson's.
Yeah, can I chime in on this comment on Terry Donovan?
Yeah.
The actor Eddie Marsan is actually an Englishman, and I've always loved, when English folks play Americans, and here he is playing a Boston-based boxer, right? It does a really fascinating job. But I listened to an interview of his where he talks about the importance of getting it right. He said, I really wanted to show the stages as we progressed. And with each season, he said, I had to come up with more, as he talks about it, vocal intonation of his voice and also the physical gestures. So he really is a scholar or a method actor of how he approached this. And I think I really appreciated to Robin's point. I think he really does a masterful job.
Yeah, I think Sam has put a link to the interview or an interview with that actor in the chat. So, and it is very interesting, and it does corroborate what you just said about him. He really took it very seriously. Yeah, Shri.
So I actually do not seek out anything related to Parkinson's. I mean, I do, but then I don't watch it. And I actually find, I think maybe Doug mentioned earlier, you can get really emotional over it. And so for me, I live with it. So I just don't want to necessarily watch a movie or a TV show other than Michael J. Fox's episode on Curb Your Enthusiasm about it. And it's interesting because I was talking to some friends who are chefs and restaurateurs, and I asked them, hey, have you watched The Bear? you know, that TV series, The Bear. And they're like, no, we have no interest in watching it. We live the life of a restaurateur, of a chef. We work in a kitchen. We don't want to see it on TV. And then I talked to some friends who are English professors. And I said, hey, have you seen that show, The Chair, about an English department in college? And they said the same thing, like, no, we live this. We don't want to see it on TV. We have no desire to. And that's kind of how I feel about seeing Parkinson's in the media. But on the other hand, I think it's important for me to watch it at the same time so I can be aware of what's out there. But I just find it to be a struggle to want to watch a portrayal of something that I deal with and then either be upset about it, enjoying it. I don't know. I'm conflicted about it.
I felt the same way about Michael J. Fox's movie Still. It was somewhat motivating, but it was also somewhat scary for me in that he talks about his support structure and his wife, and I'm single and I live alone. And it was just kind of anxiety inducing, but I recognize it's also supposed to be uplifting.
I think it's important to remember that how long he's had Parkinson's for, and that he didn't have DBS. He had whatever it's called before that.
I thought he had DBS on one side of his brain.
No, I don't think I thought it was whatever.
He had a palidotomy.
Yeah.
Oh.
Which
So-
we watched.
Right.
I actually really enjoyed Still, as painful as it was to watch, because I like portrayals that are not so sugar coated. And I felt like in some of his previous books and comments, I think it was a little too, hey, you can get over this, you can deal with it. And this one really was a portrayal of how it gets when you started dancing. One of the things that I had a chance to go to the premiere of that, the showing of Still in New York, and we were part of the Michael J. Fox investigators group for PPMI, and they invited 300 people to go to the Alice Tully Hall. And what was really nice about that was Michael came out afterwards with the producer, and they did an interview for half an hour. And it really was a struggle for him to get out there. And they asked him, why are you doing this movie now? And he says, because I still have a voice. I can now. And so I think more people saw that Still than many other of these films that we're chatting about. So I thought he did it in a very responsible way. That's just my 2 cents on that.
I absolutely agree with you, Kevin. I really enjoyed it. I mean, keeping in perspective that he's had it for so long, like I think it's really important to keep that into perspective.
I want to try to shift gears a little bit just to make sure we don't stay focused and lose track of the ability to talk about or miss the chance to talk about news coverage and the way that can affect us. Somebody put in the chat that there was a story about skin samples for Parkinson's today, and that relates to the I assume relates to the alpha-synuclein testing, and that was one of the examples of a news story when it came out last year that was really made a lot of it's made a big splash, and that happens a lot. There's the Stanford glove and the news from Yale last month that you might have seen, which announced that exercise can reverse can reverse some neurodegeneration, and gold nanocrystals were in the news just recently. So I just want to think about the way that when we see these news stories that like make these big splashes, how that might affect us in a positive way and a negative way. Christy.
I think that what's really important to do with stories like that is to go to the original scientific literature and look at it and see what it says. Because with the exercise study, it's great and all, but it was a very limited study. There's very few people, and they don't even tell us what the workout was or the workouts were. So that's problematic, for one. Also, there's like a video that I love about curing Parkinson's with Ed Begley Jr. or Senior, sorry, about stem cells is totally wrong. Like if you don't know, you won't know if you don't know stem cells. If you don't know the science, but it's wrong. So I think that like we have to be careful listening to all these videos that come out and all these news stories, because I think that they're overinflated and that we don't know unless you look at the original science.
And I'll chime in. I agree. I have people who send me these articles like, look, there's a cure, and it's some obscure mouse study that, tested 5 mice in, some Asian country. I mean, it's just people don't understand the complexity. And I end up educating people all the time about why this isn't the breakthrough that is being portrayed that it is. So I find it really frustrating, and people really, really mean well. But I always sort of tell people, if there's a cure or something that we call disease modifying, I'm going to find out about it before you find out about it, because I'm up on all the research and within the community and all that stuff. I find it really frustrating more than helpful.
If I can quickly chime in, I do a lot of research online, and I'm lucky that I have a lot of friends with Parkinson's who are really smart and they are in the field and they can articulate what I'm not understanding about the research. But not everybody has that connection, right? Not everybody has somebody on WhatsApp or on their cell phone that they can call up and say, hey, just found this research study. I'm not a trained scientist or anything. I'm just a human with Parkinson's. Can you tell me what this is? And, some of those people are on this panel, like Christy's one of the people I call up, but not everyone has a Christy. And so I think there needs to be a lot more education done about these news articles when they come out that someone from like the Davis Phinney Foundation or the Parkinson's Foundation or MJFF, I mean, maybe there is that I'm not aware of, but that go out and say, this is what the problem with this article is. This is what the truth is. Because there are so many people out there who are looking at this, who then maybe email me, or I have family members email me and say, oh my God, there's a cure. Aren't you excited? And I have to respond to them and say, yeah, that's not a cure. This is what's wrong with that. And I think that and a larger effort in that area needs to be done, because otherwise there's so much information that's not true being percolated, some word out there, out in the universe, right? And I think that's what we have these organizations for, like the Davis Phinney Foundation, to help us understand what's out there.
And if you need help, feel free to email me. I will help anybody go through any article to let them know what's going on. And if it's good science or not, or if it's bad, or if it's a waste of money, I'll let you know.
The only bad science anybody should be to enjoy is that movie Weird Science, guys. That's it.
There you
That's
go.
In the chat, I just want to point out, Samantha put a link that they release a news roundup at the end of every month. So what's in the news? But I don't know if it's a news critique or just a list of articles. I don't know.
Yeah, so that doesn't generally go too deep into any particular article in terms of evaluating the content. But we do, when there's a big splash, we'll cover it. And maybe this is a good point, and I appreciate the nudge, Shri, to think about whether we should be doing that more actively. So thanks for bringing that up. It's important to think about that as a role that we can play. We can certainly play the role of helping, like Christy said. And if you have any questions that come up, if you see a news article that you're wondering about, absolutely email us at blog@dpf.org or any of the email addresses that we have, contact at DPF. You can get to us, and we're happy to help you work through those things too. Brian, you got something?
So yeah, talking about news splash, and this is a few years ago, but when Leslie Stahl did a thing on 60 Minutes about her husband's Parkinson's, and she featured the boxing, and I think it was actually part of Rocksteady at that time. That thing made a huge impact for years, that I kept having people say, so I've heard about this boxing, what is that kind of thing? So I think that was a real positive news feature that. And the good thing is, things like that you can go up online and see. And then I also wanted to jump on something, because when Doug had mentioned
that, Brian.
What's that?
I remember seeing that.
You did? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And when Doug had mentioned about TED Talks, and I'm going to put this one in the discussion box, but there's a video that I'd seen about simple hacks for life with Parkinson's. And there was this woman who had painted a stairway for her father so he could walk through the kitchen. And it was amazing. So those things are the things I get excited about, is when you can see it and it's real and tangible. I think that's when it's really exciting. And it's kind of a drift from the movies, but it isn't. I mean, the TED Talks are kind of a small mini documentary.
Yeah, that was
fun.
actually a woman from India, a researcher
Yeah.
from India, and it was her uncle that she did the staircase for. And I actually contacted her because I know several people who have freezing and shuffling problems. And so I contacted her to say, hey, can I buy this staircase, that you print out and that you place on the floor of your home to enable people to walk. And I don't think I went through the purchase for me, but I sent it to someone I know, and I'm not sure if they purchased it. So I don't know if that works or if this has been replicated, but I'd be very curious to find out.
Oh, and I sent the link just to the panelists. Let me send it to everybody.
And so one of our attendees, Jessica Meyer, turned me on to an article that was published just last month from Yale School of Medicine. It was a study indicating that intense exercise may be neuroprotective and get you to start regrowing some dopamine producing cells. It's in the chat.
Yeah, so that article is interesting because the title of that article contradicts the first sentence of that article. And so this is an example of something that's important to look into, but it also it can be a little bit confusing because I think, as was said, it's a little bit of a small study too.
I went back to the original paper, to the science paper, and they don't really tell you what the workout was, and it was a very small sample size. I found a lot of problems with the paper reading it. It sounds great, but they don't tell you what it is. They don't tell you what the workout is. It's like some proprietary workout.
And the great news on this front, though, is that the Sparks 3 trial and other big trials are ongoing, and we will get further information about this. And it's not to say that that's not a useful bit of information, and it does bring attention. This is the complication I see with this whole subject. Articles that might not be the most comprehensive sometimes draw attention to a very important part of this life with Parkinson's. So I agree, Doug. That was an interesting article. It jumped to my attention too, but I don't think it's as big of a. It's not. It just doesn't go far enough, in my opinion, to be as useful as it could have been based on what you read in the title. Unfortunately, but we'll get there.
So I just find it interesting that in the news, all of this information about exercise in Parkinson's is coming out like, oh my God, wow, look at this new news. But it's been around for a while if you study the literature. So it's just interesting that they say that. Maybe they say that to get people's attention. But I will say that the one that caught my attention the most, even though I know about this, is not a webinar, I think it's a podcast episode that recently came out between Polly Dawkins, obviously with Davis Phinney, and Bas Bloem, about exercise and PD, or just a quick interview with him. And that really hit me so hard. Like, I've had this disease for almost 10 years and I know many things about it. And there's many more things I do not know. But that particular podcast interview episode really struck home with me about exercise and PD. So I did think about exercising after I heard that. I still haven't done it, but I'm more inclined to exercise. I will say that. So I'm working on it. I'm working on it.
It's a process.
It's a process.
Yeah, Brian.
As kind of back where we were talking about the movie depictions and things, I had seen a show, and I can't recall the name of it, but it was a few years ago. It was a summer thing. And it was made by big producers, but it was a really silly show about these insects that get into the brains of people, and it's invading Washington, D.C., and they're getting taken over by, but they had one of the sub characters had Parkinson's, and the kids just suddenly discovered that, and they go, oh my God, what stage is it? And, so I looked at that and their discussion of it, and it's kind of like the writers must have done just a very cursory view of what Parkinson's is, because, I mean, not a lot of us talk about it in the stage end of things, but it's the thing that I think when they're conveying characters in the media, in movies or in TV shows, if it's a dynamic character or a main character, they'll flush it out more, like they did with Anne Hathaway But if it's just a character that's just kind of there and it's flat, they'll show somebody just with a tremor and that's kind of it. And that's their thing. And I got to understand that even more when we went through cancer with Lily, and you start to see how almost immediately, whenever there's a depiction of somebody with cancer, they've got the scarf on the head and they've got this ashen look on their face. And it's just wrong on so many levels, but it's just their way of depicting it quick. And there's not really educated writers on a lot of these things unless they're really focusing on that as the main thing. So
I just have to comment on the Anne Hathaway movie that I could not watch it. I watched glimpses of it on TikTok and it irritated me immensely because none of my doctors are Jake Gyllenhaal. So I am not watching that movie. That's just not going to happen. No.
It was a challenging part of that movie for sure.
Yes.
There was
Before we move on, Chris, I want to mention something. It's not directly on point related to Parkinson's, but I'm worried we're going to switch into documentaries or something. And so I wanted to bring this up. There is a documentary on Netflix called Move, but it's not about Parkinson's. It's about dancers. And it is extraordinarily good. It's a 5-episode series. Each episode focuses on a different dancer. And it's just called Move. I mean, it's wonderful. But in episode 5, in the 5th episode, featuring a dancer named Akram Khan, about halfway through the episode, he starts talking about how his body is failing him as a dancer. It's not related to PD at all. It's just years of dance have taken their toll. And he has a finale dance that he performs, and it's a very short piece called Death of a Dancer. And it was so striking and so moving to me. I felt like it was visual poetry that captured the kind of disorienting feeling I have as I slowly lose control over my body. And so I just wanted to commend that to you guys. I found it so moving that I actually emailed him and thanked him for the piece that was featured in the documentary.
Yeah, just because what you're saying is relates to an experience I recently had, I want to jump in and plug the Robin Williams documentary that's on Max right now, which is more directly maybe connected to Parkinson's, considering that Robin Williams had Lewy body dementia, but it's very powerful in the way that it doesn't. He's talking about the brain and the way we operate the whole time throughout his career, and it just. It just comes full circle towards the end when you represent when his diagnosis comes on and his life changes the way it did. But anyway, that's a great documentary as well.
Is that the one his wife made?
Yeah, I think it's called "Come Inside My Mind," maybe, or something like that. Welcome Inside My Mind. And Kevin, you had your hand up for a little while.
The one his wife made was called Robin's Wish.
Okay.
And it just features Robin going through the stages of his disease, with the idea of not blaming it on addiction or in mental health, but really an organic brain disease. It's really well done too.
Yeah, so that's a different one than I was talking about, but I haven't seen that one. But yeah, it's good, nice that there's two different takes on this particular story, and they're both apparently pretty powerful.
What's the title of the one on Max?
It's "Come Inside My Mind" or "Welcome Inside My Mind," something to that effect.
When I was watching Michael J. Fox in Still, I was just looking at, he had covered so much and very difficult to look at and all, but at the same point, it gives some people some reality of the progression. I think the one thing that saddened me was he didn't talk about the non-motor aspects of the disease as much. But then, that wasn't really his thing, wasn't here's what Parkinson's is. His thing was here's how it's affected my life. But I just thought that was an excellent opportunity to kind of get to some of that.
Yeah, Kevin.
To tap on to what Robin talked about as far as documentaries on moving, there's a great one out there called Capturing Grace.
Yes.
It's done on David Leventhal's Dance for Parkinson's program. Excellent portrayal of what dance and music can do for those specifically with Parkinson.
I've got a gentleman who does a lot of great photography and video, and it goes back to Doug's earlier comment about Heather's video, and I'm trying to get his name in here, his stuff, but it's his name is Anders Linus, I think, from Norway, and he does a lot of very poignant documentaries. He did this thing about this is Parkinson's, and he's showing people that are young. He really got the young onset pictures really well. Oh, I didn't hit send. Sorry. Why isn't it going?
Yeah, Brian.
But I saw him at WTC a couple of years ago, and he's just amazing. He's really on top of things.
Okay.
And he did Heather's documentary that Doug was referencing, and so that website that I just sent everybody, it's got that link to all of his documentaries. He's really a great voice, and he has Parkinson's.
Kevin, I think you were about to say something.
Yeah, I don't want to forget about our namesake, Davis Phinney here, who has put out some amazing content. My favorite video of his is one that you may or may not have seen. It's actually sponsored by Lululemon, who is a sponsor of Davis's son Taylor. And this 5-minute video actually is a father-son portrayal of the two of them. It brought me to tears when I watched it the first time, and I sent it to all my friends on Father's Day, who are fathers, and say, please watch this video. It really is powerful.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Kevin. That is a great video.
And if I could quickly chime in about the Davis Phinney Foundation too, I am always surprised by the amount of content that's on the website. I don't browse the website enough sometimes, and when I do, I'm like, oh, why did I not know about this, or why did I not know about that? So I've been spending more time on the website looking at what they have to offer, and there's just an incredible amount of information that I'm sending to friends and to people and reviewing myself. So, if you guys haven't browsed the Davis Phinney website, definitely something to look into. It's a
In addition to that, Kevin and Davis's last podcast that you guys did together, it was awesome.
Oh, that was a lot of fun. Thanks.
I enjoyed listening a lot.
We're coming up to the close of the hour, but there's a couple of questions that we've received that I want to try to sneak in here and address if we can. The first question was one that was asked in the chat. Someone asked, do you have any sort of introductory resource that you really like if somebody is ignorant entirely about Parkinson's, something as a basic 101? I mean, we have resources like that on the website, but maybe the panelists have something else that they like as a sort of first pass at Parkinson's.
Wow, that is tough. When I was actually diagnosed in 2015, I was looking for content like that. And I will tell you, what I really wanted was for my doctor to tell me what Parkinson's was all about versus having to research online. But when I did find the Davis Phinney Foundation, the Every Victory Counts manual was helpful to me. Stuff from the Bryant Grant Foundation was helpful. Stuff from the Parkinson's Foundation, they have intros to that. But when you actually type in Parkinson's disease in Google or Yahoo or whatever you're using, one of the first links that come up is information from the Mayo Clinic. And they have a pretty good summary as to what Parkinson's disease is.
I guess maybe the way to answer this is probably best to if we put some links in the blog post to get to the bottom of this question with some good overview articles, unless anybody has something that's jumping to mind right now. The other question that's that came through yesterday was somebody asking, I hear a lot of things about dementia and I'm newly diagnosed, and that's they say frightening, and they say that they don't know else to do besides the things they're already doing, which is exercise and trying to eat well and be social, but they're just scared. So that comes from the way that the symptoms of Parkinson's are discussed in various places. And I wonder how you navigate those fearful moments when you're encountering something that you don't know is going to happen, but maybe it will. And you hear that's a symptom of Parkinson's. So what do you do? How do you stave off the fear?
I don't know that this is answering what to stave off the fear, but I think what I learned to do was get myself tested by a neuropsychologist and get at least a base, and then start to see where the memory problems are going. And that helped me a lot, because at first I had a heavy decline. But then we figured out after years of consistent testing that it was the stress that I had while I was trying to teach and still had Parkinson's. But anyway, that's kind of an indirect answer about that memory.
I think that's a great answer. I mean, it gives you, it's empowering to have information and to have people working with you to make sure you're aware of what's happening. Anybody else have anything on this subject?
I think my comment is that we're all on a different time frame of discovery. And the thing you don't want to do is use social media and dive into it before you're ready. If you try to learn everything all at once, it's going to flood you. And you should take it in increments as you're ready to learn.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you can easily be overwhelmed because there is an awful lot of information from a lot of different sources. So, okay, well, thanks for taking a stab at that. Does anybody else have any way to deal with the fear of what symptoms might arise in the future?
Talk to your
I think Kevin
doctors.
really nailed it. Don't go down that rabbit hole.
Try to stay in the day. Don't live in the wreckage of an imagined future. Just really try to stay in the day.
Yeah,
That's perfect.
Well put.
very well put.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today for another meetup.